Okay. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Bonjour a nos amis et collègues francophones, e benvenuti anche ai nostri amici italiani. Welcome to September Stories with Licia Canton. We are all on different territories at this time. I'd like to acknowledge that I am located on unceded indigenous lands. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. We acknowledge them and other nations who care for the land across our country, recorded and unrecorded. And we pay our respects to Canada's first storytellers. Please remain muted. Feel free to type in questions using the chat at any time during the readings. I will read them out during question period, so please make sure your questions are directed to me. And now I'd like to introduce author Russell Fralich. Russell and Licia met thanks to the Quebec Writers Federation's Hire a Writer program. Russell launched his first novel, True Patriots, earlier this year, just before the pandemic shut everything down in Montreal and everywhere else. Russell, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. Thanks very much. And welcome, everyone. Bienvenue tout le monde aux September Stories de Licia Canton. Je m'appelle Russell Fralich et je suis, comme Domenic a raconté, I'm an author of my first novel, so it physically exists. It came out about a couple of weeks before the pandemic, and c'est grâce à largement au mentorship et l'appui de Licia. And the topic of September Stories had me thinking about what does September mean? And for me, September is normally a month of remembrance and hope. Smiling, frenetic summers, and for the kids, maybe it's a spark ignited as the last day of school, maybe a summer camp, hanging out with friends at the park, camping with family, but for us older folks, maybe it's like life sort of shifts down a year or two, and it's the allure of long fading twilight, cottages, staying out late at night at the cafe or the resto. And of course, as we all know, this year has been completely different, and our memories of summer may be starker, blurred, etched more in black and white than in rosy pastel colors, maybe something we'd rather forget. But the other side of September is the promise of something new. And I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, and September sees the return of thousands of students migrating back, looking to become something better than they are now. And this is what I was thinking about when I saw Licia's title, September Stories. What stories would I tell in the future? And I met Licia at the Blue Metropolis Festival, I think about 3 years ago. It's like, well, that's a long time. And I was looking for an experienced editor. I knew nobody. I needed someone who knew how to fix my technical writing flaws that I could no longer see because I've been writing the same story for 5 years. And also someone who understood how the industry worked. And I contacted her I saw her, I talked to her a little bit, and she suggested to maybe hire a writer program at the Quebec Writers Federation. I've been a member of the QWF on and off for a while, and I'm so glad that she did. And from her, I really needed someone who could help me get this first novel ready for submission to publishers. And she was definitely the right choice for me. And I saw she quickly put the spotlight on what crippled my story. And she gave me pretty precise feedback. And now, as a result, my scenes are now more gripping, tension sharper, dialogue crisper. And her detailed literary diagnosis came with an easy-to-follow prescription to tame everything from these critical details of main characters to even errant commas. I was terrible with commas. I think I still am, I'm sorry. She was fast, thorough, and patient, and she took a lot of time to explain every intricacy, even when I had very dumb questions. I can't wait to work with her again on my second novel, which, unfortunately, the pandemic is taking longer than I thought. I'm sorry, it's coming. Leach has published 12 books, including The Pink House and Other Stories in 2018, Almond, Wine, and Fertility. She's a founding editor-in-chief of Accenti magazine, where she organizes the annual writing contest, and Capture an Italian Moment photo competition. At Accenti, she manages a student internship at Bishop's University. She's also the past president of the Association of Italian Canadian Writers and a mentor for emerging writers and editors, emerging writer here, and at the Writer for Hire at the Quebec Writers Federation. Leach is an honorary fellow in translation at the University of Hull in the United Kingdom, and in 2019, she was a visiting professor and writer in residence at the University of Calabria. She's the recipient of the Premio Italia del Mondo in 2018, She holds a PhD from Université de Montréal, something else that we share, and an MA from McGill University. And I am so happy to be here to introduce her. Please welcome Licia Canton.
Thank you, Russell. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your kind introduction. Hi, everyone. You're all over the place. I'm really thrilled that you could make it here to listen to my stories. Ideally, I would be there in person wherever you may be. We have people from across Canada and some people in Europe and Spain and France and Italy. So I'm really grateful that you're here to listen to my stories. I will be reading some unpublished writing and also some published writing. And well, I'm mostly a short story writer, but I do also write nonfiction. And I've published a few poems. I'm always really afraid to read poems, but I'll read a few. And I'm going to start off with a poem because it's short and it's going to make me feel a little bit more comfortable. So I have a few poems in this collection, Exploring Voice, Italian-Canadian female writers. I'm really thrilled and I feel very grateful to have been included in this volume, which was edited by the late Venera Fazio and by Delia DeSantis. It includes 26 women Canadian writers of Italian heritage. And the poem that I'm going to read from this book is titled, and some of you have already read it, I'm sure, or heard me read it in public, The Most Extraordinary Man in the World. And this is a response to Giorgio Di Cico's 1986 poem, which was titled The Most Extraordinary Women in the World. And as some of you know, Pier Giorgio Di Cico passed away recently. So here it is. The most extraordinary man in the world always comes to bed with me. This man is poetic justice for those who came before him. He takes his children to school every morning, finishes work early to share the gentle sun rays with his sons and daughters, makes music with them on cold winter evenings. This man is not arrogant, authoritative, condescending. Words his forefathers wore well, as their women wore bruises. Words deleted from my dictionary in any language still exist in dialect, not to be spoken like stupida, stronza, troia. The most extraordinary man in the world weaves words with this woman. Here on this page, a new narrative for our children to call home. So that breaks the ice a little bit. And again, to those of you who have already read this story, in front of the Bell Center, which exists in Italian as well, been published in Italian. It's in the Pink House and Other Stories. It's a very, very short story. It is part of the Leonard Cohen series of stories, 6 stories that appear in the Pink House and Other Stories. And it is really the introductory story to the other 5 stories. And it's very short, it's 500 words. It's what we call flash fiction or microfiction. It comes out of a period when I was unable to write. And so this was the first story that I wrote that got me writing again in 2013, I guess. In front of the Bell Center. I'm here. Her face is a bold mask, a cold stare that says, "What do you want? Where do you want me to be?" Closer. I'd like you to be closer. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'd like. I don't say it. I'm comforted to see that she is there, to know that she has stopped screaming. I didn't see her scream, but I know that she was the one screaming, a loud screeching yell, pain and sorrow and helplessness. I am lying on the sidewalk, cold, shivering, faces looking down at me, cold, someone holds my hand. I'm a doctor. What's your name? How old are you? Squeeze my hand. I squeeze the stranger's hand. I'm 50. I'm crying. My tears are cold. I can't move. I'm stuck. She is a face in the crowd gathered here to look at me. But she doesn't belong in the crowd. She belongs right next to me. I know that she doesn't know where to be or what to do or what to say. She's just a helpless girl. She's in shock. She's traumatized. By now, she would have been sitting in the passenger seat as I drove us home. By now, we would have been on Sherbrooke Street, heading towards Pinaf Boulevard, in a rush to get home to get a few hours of sleep before the 6 o'clock alarm. Before she would get on a bus, on a subway, to get to school where she would write her early morning exam. Will she make it tomorrow? I don't know where I'll be at 6 a.m. That's only 6 hours from now. I won't be there to make her breakfast or to wish her good luck on the exam. If I weren't lying here, unable to move, tomorrow before sunrise, I would be at the window watching as she walks to Lacordaire Boulevard to take the express bus, the 4:32 bus that takes her to the Cadillac subway station. I always lock the door after her and rush to the window to wave. She looks up as she walks by and gives me a big smile. Her lips purse into a kiss. She loves me. Now she is standing there. She has forgotten the shape of a smile. She's 5 feet away. No one here knows that she loves me. I'm not supposed to be lying on my back on the cold sidewalk. I can feel the small gravel under my down coat. Those little rocks that the city disseminates to keep pedestrians from slipping on the sidewalk. But I did not slip. That's not why I'm lying here on Avenue des Canadiens de Montréal at the corner of Drummond, across the street from the Bell Center. Strange faces staring down at me. I can hear the ambulance in the distance. It is getting closer. It is coming for me. I squeeze the stranger's hand. So that was in front of the Bell Center. Now a little bit less sad, perhaps. I have a text that has been published in different forms, that is in different places, different excerpts. I will read the original, which appeared a few years back in Canadian Literary Fair, which is a research group that studies food in Canadian literature at McGill University. And the title is Polenta and Radicchio. Few people know that I'm a writer with a backup plan. I put myself through school. That's university, cégep, high school, and elementary by working in my parents' butcher shop. I can handle several types of butcher's knives. I can debone a pig's head and make a variety of cuts out of pork shoulder or a side of beef. I've always found solace knowing that if times might get really tough and I wouldn't be able to pay the bills by working with words, I could always seek employment in the meat department of a supermarket. I grew up in a Venetian Canadian family. My parents owned a butcher shop at the corner of Sabrevois and Rome Streets in Montreal North. We ate a lot of meat. Whatever was not sold ended up in our plates at dinner time. Filet mignon was a rare treat. We ate polenta and radicchio, staples in my parents' hometown. It was my responsibility to prepare dinner after school and lunch every second Sunday. I made the meat sauce for the pasta, what we called el sugo. I was taught that every recipe takes a long time to make. Polenta, for instance, needed to be stirred non-stop. Years later, I found out that there's a shortcut to making polenta. Simply add salt to boiling water, add the cornmeal, put the lid on the pot, and let the polenta cook by itself. No need to stir for 30 to 45 minutes. I could have gone outside to play while the polenta cooked itself had I known that the end product was the same. I am convinced that my parents taught me the long version because they wanted me to stay inside the house. Some nights, instead of having pasta or soup as a first course, we had polenta e latte, polenta and milk. Once the polenta was ready, we added spoonfuls to a bowl of cold milk. The polenta warmed up the milk. It was like drinkable cornmeal. In our vegetable garden, we mostly grew radicchio, our staple vegetable year-round. We ate fresh red radicchio until the snow came. Then we cooked and strained the radicchio, shaped it into balls, and froze them. The dark green balls were taken out of the freezer, diced, and sautéed in onion. It was rather bitter, but we ate it with meat, polenta, pasta al ragù, and wine. My father made his own wine every September. He mixed several types of California grapes. Zinfandel was his favorite. We children, too, were obliged to drink a quarter or an eighth glass of red wine at dinner time before we could drink anything else. I closed my eyes and drank it right away so that I could drink something else. My sister did not drink anything during the meal. She always tried to leave the table without drinking the wine. "Come back here, Esther," my father would say after dinner as she walked away from the table. "You have to drink the wine. You know that." She'd go back and gulp it down and then run away. When I was younger and had nothing to do, read before the children were born, I liked to make my own pasta and gnocchi just like our mothers and grandmothers used to do. Nowadays, if my Calabrian Canadian self-appointed chef husband colleague insists on making dinner as a de-stressor, who am I to argue? On the menu tonight, as a way of reconnecting to our roots, cooked radicchio, polenta and milk, and pasta al forno, not to be confused with lasagna or pasticcio. Okay, so that was polenta and radicchio. I just wanted to let you know that it is very cold in Montreal. I don't know. I'm sure some people who are here today, they can go to the beach, but not here. Okay, so I am going to read an excerpt of a new story, which has already found a home. And I'll be reading excerpts of stories because otherwise it'll be really long to read a whole story. This one has found a home in an anthology of the short story edited by Maurice Lee. And the title is High and By. And it's a story about a very special friendship. It was the first Monday in January, right after the holidays. She didn't know that she'd been the subject of conversations over the past few months. I had gone years without thinking of her. There really wasn't anything around to remind me of those times. I had nothing of hers. There were photos and albums stored in boxes somewhere, but no one looked at those. Even my mother had stopped asking about her years ago. "I can't believe it's you." I watched her rushing down the aisle. She had spotted me right away. I saw her grin from that distance. I turned my cart into the aisle and walked quickly towards her. "You look the same," I said. "No, you look the same," she beamed, her eyes shining. We hugged, bulky coats in the way. "I'm so happy to see you." She had tears in her eyes. "Oh my God." I reached for the tissue in my coat pocket. I never talked about her, but she was never too far away. It took just one fairy tale character or a cartoon or a baby in a stroller to bring her back. The older children wouldn't remember her unless I gave them clues. Remember homemade chocolate ricotta cake? Not really. Playing musical chairs on your 8th birthday? I prodded. I have a vague memory. Remember Diana and Robin? I asked. Ah, yes, my oldest said. Well, she was their mother, I said. Whatever happened to them? We sort of went our separate ways after you went to different schools. We hadn't really spoken in 20 years. I had bumped into her maybe 3 or 4 times, but it was always a quick hi. A little uncomfortable, a little sad, maybe even a little sly. Always a smile, or rather a mischievous parting of the lips, and teary eyes that were caught between pain and joy. We didn't stick around long enough to find out which way the tears would fall, immediately putting distance between each other. Quickly blending into the crowd, not allowing more, we went off to our own worlds. No time for what ifs. We had to get back to our real lives fast. We could have been friends at a young age, in childhood or adolescence, but we weren't. We had lived in the same neighborhood, on the same street, but we were years apart. We came together much later, in our 30s, in the early years of wedded bliss, but that was not to last. We had come together quickly and intensely. Just saw her at the grocery store, I texted, as I unwillingly walked away from her after our chat in the store. He'd want to know. He'd know who I was referring to because she was the subject of pain and disappointment that he could relate to. He'd want to talk about my encounter later in the evening, I was sure. We'd had a 45-minute conversation right next to the cornflakes and shredded wheat, catching up on our lives with no one interrupting us, saying as much as possible in the shortest time possible. I was careful not to say anything that would erase the smile on her face, the joy in her voice. I'm tired, she had said. She had spent the last 2 decades caring for everyone in the family. First, she had raised her kids. Then she had cared for each of the 4 parents. I listened and consoled her whenever I could find the right words. I nodded in the right places to keep her talking. I was careful not to say I understood when I had not yet lost a parent. The phone in my coat pocket was buzzing again. I had turned it off the first time it had buzzed. I'm so sorry, I said. I have to rush off. The first phone alarm told me that it was time to go towards the cash. The second buzzing was to go to the car. I had to exit the store really quickly. It's okay, she said. I wish we could keep talking, I said. I have an appointment. I couldn't miss it. I'd waited a long time to see the specialist. I'm sorry that I kept you so long, she said. I could just not go. I left the cart with my items by the cash and exited the store. If it hadn't been for that appointment, I would have asked her to join me for coffee. She would have said no. I'm quite sure of that. I looked you up on social media, I hinted before leaving her. I don't even have an email address, she said. I wouldn't have time to check messages. But I'm sure she had a cell phone. She had a big, bulky one years ago so that her husband could call her anytime. I had really hated that phone. She didn't give me her cell number. I didn't ask for it. I used to know her home number by heart. It was the number I dialed most often back then, calling her back to say something I'd forgotten after our hour-long conversation. First thing in the morning or just before dinner, on days that we did not see each other, always during office hours, never when her husband was home. Only once I called her in the evening. She didn't answer. So that's just the beginning of High and By. It goes on, and I look forward to reading it in its entirety at some other time. I just want to remind you that if you have any questions that you want to ask me during the question period, you can write them in the chat and Domenic will collect those. All right, I'm going to read something different. People, Places, Passages. If you don't have this volume, you should get it. It's People, Places, Passages, an anthology of Canadian writing, edited by Julia de Gasperi, Delia de Santis, and Carolyn Morgan Di Giovanni. It was published in 2018. It has 545 pages, almost 100 contributors, all of them writers, Canadian writers, all of them with a connection to Italy. So in this big volume, it's really a brick, I have some poems in Italian, in dialect. I also have a short story titled Refuge in the Vineyard. So what I'm going to read, I'm going to read an Italian poem, and then I'm going to read its relative, which is in dialect, Cavarzeran, my dialect. And the way I've set these up, scrittore è in italiano, e scrittrice è in dialetto. And I'm really grateful that the person who did the layout put them side by side. So I'll start with scrittore. Se non fossi stato scrittore, avrei amato una donna pienamente come meritava di essere amata. Se non fossi stato scrittore, avrei ascoltato parole innocenti, salutato sorrisi ingenui, giocato. Se non fossi stato scrittore, avrei versato il pagamento mensile, pagato l'ipoteca in 10 anni o meno. Invece ho scritto il vero amore, l'orgoglio paterno, la serenità familiare, parole che toccano fino in fondo anime di estranei, mai visti, sconosciuti. Sono ammirato, invidiato da chi non conosce la doppia vita, la solitudine, le ansie. Sì, sono scrittore. E adesso la versione Cavarzeran, del titolo è Scrittrice. Se non fosse sta scrittrice, Gavaria amà un uomo, come meritava di essere amà. Se non fosse sta scrittrice, Gavaria ascoltà con pazienza parole innocenti, sempre saudà sorrisi ingenui. Zuga. Se non fosse sta scrittrice, Gavaria versà pagamenti mensili, scanceà il mutuo in 10 anni o manco. Se non fosse sta scrittrice, Gavaria bu una casa pulita e profumà. Cassetti ordinà, piastrè, lustrà, gingilli spolverà. Gavaria preparà con passione pasti prelibati, tagliadee, fugasse e pan, tutto fatto in casa. Fioi, fradei, nevudi, genitori, suoceri, amici, se si riassentà attorno a metoa ogni tanto, ogni dì. Invece mi, go scritto è il vero amore, è l'orgoglio materno e la serenità della famiglia. Parole che ga toccà fin in fondo anime de stranieri, mai visti, sconosciuti, parole ammirà, invidià, città, da chi non conosce e a doppia vita e a solitudine e ansie. Sì, so scrittrice. Water is my favorite drink. Okay, so I will read now another story, new writing. This one here hasn't found a home. I'm hanging on to it. I've been hanging on to it for a few years. I'm afraid to let it go. And the title is Sundays I Wear Lipstick. So this is just an excerpt. I watched the car leave the driveway. I watched as it turned left onto the main street. I took a few steps towards the sidewalk to see it reach the main boulevard, then turn right towards the highway. I was happy to see it go. I was happy to see her leave, finally. I would never see her again. The source of my winter-long state of bewilderment. All winter, I couldn't wait for her to go. Why am I still crying? Before the snow came, I hadn't cried in years, but it was a difficult winter. I cried a lot, mostly in the shower, where no one could hear me, even though there was usually no one home but me. I cried in the shower so that I wouldn't see my tears. The warm water washed away my sadness. It was soothing. Months ago, I found her in my kitchen, sitting on the movable stool, the one I sit on every morning at breakfast. I look out at my neighbor's side door with the frilly curtain and the multicolored welcome sign. I usually stare at it, hoping to see a familiar face. Days when I spot my neighbor, the husband coming to take the large green recycling bin to the curb, I move back a little so that he cannot see me looking at him. On that particular morning, when I found her on my stool, I had been awakened early by the occasional squeak emitted by the very stool. It reached me all the way down the hall. The third squeak got me up for a glass of water. I walked down the hallway in the dark. I was in the kitchen before I realized she was sitting at the counter. I didn't have my glasses on, so I could not really tell what she looked like. I hope it's all right that I helped myself to some orange juice. She had an accent. Oh, that's all I was able to sputter. I was thinking what to say while simultaneously trying to decipher the meaning of this person in my kitchen. I'm sorry, I should introduce myself, she said hurriedly. I'm Tony's friend. Ah, I said. I hoped that she could see my smile. Nice to meet you, I said, getting a little closer. I shook her hand, which seemed sort of odd to do in the middle of the night. Really, the handshake had more to do with my wanting to get a good look at her because I had left my glasses in the bedroom. I hope we didn't wake you last night, she said. I remembered now. I was between snoozes when I heard Tony come in. I checked the clock and it was almost 12:30. I was happy that I still had as much as 8 hours left to sleep. I was also happy that it wasn't too late. Sometimes Tony comes in really late, in the wee hours of the morning. I've stopped waiting up. It has been at least 5 years since I've waited for anyone. I need my sleep. I take the house phone off its cradle at night and keep it on my nightstand all night. If there's an emergency, they will call and I will answer. I got up and walked over to my bedroom door as Tony was walking by. I heard the movement of more than one body. Tony, in my doorway, stooped down and gave me a big kiss on the cheek. I hope it's okay if my friend sleeps over. That's fine, no problem, I said. I didn't get a look at the person behind Tony. I didn't think twice about it and went back to bed. When I made my way to the kitchen, beckoned by the third squeak, I had no recollection of that conversation. She'll sleep on the sofa downstairs, Tony had said. I had always thought and I had always said that any friend of Tony's was a friend of mine. I would rather Tony bring friends to the house than roam around the city in the middle of the night. I have always said that to each of my kids when they still lived at home. I used to worry about each and every one of them at different times for different reasons. Those first nights out, I would wait by the window. Not anymore. I'm too old to worry. I look much older than my age now because I used to worry a lot. Decades ago, when I had babies, little ones, older, more experienced parents and grandparents than me would look at them admiringly. Ah, so cute, oh my God, enjoy them while they are small, they'd say. You have small problems now with small kids. Oh, but wait till they grow up, you'll have bigger problems. At that time, I was just hoping that they would get out of diapers fast. Seems like that's all I did back then. Changing diapers was my full-time job. Would you like some coffee or tea? I asked a stranger in my kitchen. No, thanks, she said. That's very kind of you to ask, though. Okay, then, I'm going to bed. I just got up for a glass of water. It's too early for me to start my day. Nice to meet you, she said as I walked away. I stopped, turned around, walked back a few steps, faced her, and smiled. Nice to meet you too. I considered keeping her company, but I wanted to sleep more. I am usually a welcoming host, but in the middle of the night, I suppressed that side of me. My kids used to say I was too nice to strangers. Not anymore. Some of that had faded with age. It did cross my mind, however, that if she was waiting for Tony to get up, she'd be waiting a long time. So that's an excerpt from a homeless story titled Sundays I Wear Lipstick. Okay, it's 12:44, so I will read two more short pieces. This one here is in French, and I want to thank Laure Morali, who's a French language writer. She was writer in residence here at the Saint Leonard Library, La Bibliothèque de Saint Léonard, and I wrote this in the wintertime before COVID. This text, as well as another one of my texts, is at an exhibit at the library right now until October 3rd. So those of you who are in this area and would like to see my writing, as well as other women, I think we were all women, there's this exhibit. There's also a public reading on October 3rd, but the public is not invited. So it'll only be the writers reading because of physical distancing restrictions. And so that's a little strange, but I mean, these are the times we live in. So this is a very short excerpt, the text that is in the exhibit, but the longer version, and it's really much longer, has just been accepted for publication by a French language feminist magazine. So I'm happy about that. And I'm grateful to Laure Morali for having encouraged me to write during the winter months. And the title is Lui et les enfants. C'est une photo. Mais ce n'est pas n'importe quelle photo. C'est la photo que j'apporte avec moi à chaque voyage depuis 2002. Un peu abîmée, elle a été pliée en deux par quelqu'un. Je ne sais pas qui. Un enfant, sans doute. Quelqu'un qui ne sait pas qu'une photo ne se plie pas, ne devrait pas être pliée. Le coupable pourrait être sur la photo, en fait. C'est un lit avec des personnes, toutes ensemble dans le lit, très serré, le plus grand au centre avec ses bras autour des autres, des bras grands et forts. Cette photo a beaucoup voyagé avec la photographe qui a eu souvent besoin de quitter les gens sur la photo. tous en pyjama dans le lit un beau dimanche. Je me rappelle, c'était le dimanche de la fête des pères, le 16 juin pour être précise. Le lit de la photo est encore celui où je me couche chaque soir. C'est le lit qu'il avait déjà lorsque je suis rentrée chez lui la première fois et que j'y suis restée. Cette photo me rend triste. Cette photo me rend heureuse. Cette photo me rappelle que j'ai choisi, que j'ai poursuivi mon chemin, même quand ceux qui m'aiment ne comprenaient pas. Oui, j'en suis convaincue. Ils m'aiment. Toutes les personnes dans la photo m'aiment. Ils m'aimaient lorsque je l'ai prise, cette photo. Et ils m'aiment encore beaucoup aujourd'hui. Ils ont tous souri lorsque je leur ai montré la photo aujourd'hui. J'ai pleuré en regardant cette photo. Les enfants sont tellement beaux, tellement sages, tellement petits. Le jour que la photo a été prise, je pouvais encore prendre chaque enfant dans mes bras. J'ai pleuré en regardant cette photo aujourd'hui. J'ai pleuré des larmes de joie, des larmes de tristesse, des larmes de vie. So that was an excerpt from Lui et les enfants. And I guess this will be the last one. This is a poem that I wrote many, many years ago. It was published in this book, Writing Beyond History, which was published in 2006, I believe. 2006. And it's about my maternal grandmother, Nonna Gina, that I used to visit often in Italy. And the title is Chi non viene. And this poem has also been published in French, Ceux qui ne viennent pas. I originally wrote it in dialect, and I was never able to write it in English. Chi non viene. Sorda e cieca non si muove se qualcuno non la muove. Seduta vicino alla finestra, lo scialle sulle spalle, un altro sulle gambe, tutto il giorno da sola. Aspetta chi non viene, chi dovrebbe venire. Il campanello suona e suona, ma non viene nessuno. Sono andati via. La vita continua, ma lei né vede né sente. Che triste diventare vecchia, che brutto aspettare chi non viene. Ecco, c'è qualcuno, un'ombra sulla porta, una vocina lontana. E lei? Sei tu? Ti ho tanto aspettata, pensavo fossi già andate via, lontano. Sei tu? Vieni vicino, vedo poco, solo un'ombra. Dammi un bacio. Che triste diventare vecchia, che brutto aspettare chi non viene, aspettare la corriera che non arriva mai, quella gratis che non torna più. Thank you very much for listening. It is now 12:50 and I'm not sure where my host is, but if there are questions, I would be happy to answer your questions. And if there aren't, I can always keep on reading because I've got lots of things to read on my list here that I didn't get to.
Okay, Licia, if I can interrupt you, your host is here, is present. And there are some questions, but before we go to the questions, I would like to perhaps invite Russell if he has a question that he would like to ask to get the ball rolling. So Russell?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Domenic. Yeah, sure. Licia, you write so many different kinds of genres and styles. Do you have any preference? Do you prefer the nonfiction to the fiction, the poetry to the nonfiction?
Well, my genre is the short story. That's the genre that I prefer to read and that I prefer to write. I like to create characters. But I also write essays, personal essays. But if I have to choose a genre, it's the short story. Yeah, poetry, I'm not a poet, but every once in a while, I mean, I end up writing a poem.
So what's the main attraction for you as a short storyist then? What does short story give you that novels don't? Or wouldn't?
As a writer, okay, I'm afraid of writing a novel.
But you helped me so much.
Sorry?
But you helped me so much.
Yes.
Look, it's very packed. There's lots of words.
I'm very good at giving advice. Not so good at taking advice. No, actually, it's so in the Pink House and other stories, I have two linked stories with the characters of Massimiliano and Rita, and that is now a novel. I mean, I have so many linked stories about Massimiliano and Rita that I'm working on a novel. But the reason I say I'm afraid of a novel is I'm afraid I'm never going to finish it. A short story, even though I have short stories that are just sitting there waiting, either because I don't feel that the ending is adequate, or in some cases, I'm afraid to let stories go. And I guess it's just about timing, So the short story, I can sit down, I can finish a story, I can send it out, I can read it in public, short story, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, whatever. A novel, it's, I guess during COVID, during, confinement is a good time to work on a novel if you're able to. But yeah, so that's why I like the short story. And I've always liked, even as a student, I preferred reading the short story to the novel. I studied literature, so the novels we had to read sometimes, were 800 pages, and short stories are nice. You can read a short story and then fall asleep. If I'm reading a novel, I get through maybe 2 pages and then I fall asleep. So wait till the next time I have time to keep reading.
Okay, thanks, Licia. Domenic?
Thank you, Russell. We have a question from Terry. Terry is asking, how has Leach's writing or writing process been affected by the lockdown, if at all?
That's a very good question, Terry. Yes, so at the beginning, even pre-lockdown, I was going to the library every week and participating in these French workshops with other ladies. We were all ladies, maybe 6 or 7, and I was having so much fun. And then I figured, oh, now I'm home and I'll just keep writing. And I did for a little bit while this workshop went online. So we continued a few months. And so I had the sort of that weekly meeting where I owed my workshop participants another section of my novel about Massimiliano and Rita, and they were waiting every week. So I felt obliged. I didn't want to disappoint them. So I would show up every week with another excerpt from my novel. And then after that was over, it's interesting because I had started at the end of May with Annalisa Panatti, who is in France, a writer in France. I had started Shut Up and Write with Annalisa because we were going to the Quebec Writers Federation Shut Up and Write every second Saturday morning online, right, on Zoom. But that wasn't enough for us. So we started our own. And so every Thursday morning, 10 a.m. to 12:30 Montreal time, she and I would get together and write. And that worked fine. And then we opened it up to anybody and specifically publicized it through the Association of Italian Canadian Writers. For some reason, then I ended up becoming the sort of the technical host, taking care of things, letting people in. And I sort of stopped writing sometime mid-July. And so Massimiliano and Rita are sort of like waiting for me. And yeah, but I still think it's important. I still go to Shut Up and Write. I see that it's very, very beneficial to other writers. So I'm grateful for that. And for instance, last Thursday, what did I do? I didn't actually do any new writing, but I looked at my old writing to choose the the selections that I was going to read today. So that's connected to writing. Yeah, so the lockdown, you know, for some people, I know that it's been very, very beneficial in the sense that they're isolated and therefore can get a lot of good writing done. And for other people, I mean, I'm not able to sleep. My sleep is agitated, so I always feel like I'm jet lagged, and so my thoughts aren't that clear, and I can do my work, of course, but as far as writing short stories or writing continuing the novel writing, it's very, very slow, but I haven't given up, and I'm very, very hopeful. So yeah, that's to answer Terry's question.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Rosanna. Licia, who or what inspired you to start writing?
Lots of people, really, lots of people. But I remember, so I started writing when I was younger, you know, in my 20s. I, like a lot of writers or a lot of people who never became writers, you know, just keeping notes, writing sketches. I remember being at the McClellan Library at McGill, and instead of working on my master's thesis, I was jotting down, you know, things for future stories or future poems that I still have and never did anything with, but it was sort of a way of procrastinating from doing the academic writing. So I came to writing through academia, and specifically by studying Canadian writers of Italian heritage. So my PhD thesis was on novels by Canadian writers of Italian heritage. And one of my colleagues, who was a graduate student when I was a graduate student, some of you may know Domenic Beneventi, one time we interviewed a professor from France, someone who was visiting from France. And we were talking about stories, story writing, the authors that we're studying in our academic writing. And I said, well, you know, I have a lot of stories too that I'd like to share eventually. And he said, so why don't you just write them? And that was like, you know, le déclencheur, as they say in French. It's like, yeah, why don't I just write them? And then, you know, of course, finding the time to write them. Eventually I did. The first short story that I wrote was From the Sixth Floor. And that was a fluke, but it won an award with the Canadian Authors Association in 2001. And then when I wrote the Italian version, it won an award, the Italian Week Ottawa Award for prose, Dal Sesto Piano. And that year I also submitted Chi non viene, and that also won. That was 2004, I remember. But then after that, no more awards. So, you know.
Okay.
So beginner's luck.
Anthony asks, who is your ideal reader? Who are you writing for?
Well, I'll answer this, you know, about the short story. My first short story collection, which I didn't read, I was going to read Easter Morning, which I really like to read, but I decided to answer questions instead. So Almond, Wine and Fertility, 15 stories there. That was published the first time in 2008. That story, those stories that, you know, they shift between Canada and Italy. They're mostly about Italian Canadian. The characters are mostly of Italian origin living in Canada. And I think mostly those stories I wrote for women to encourage women, to encourage myself, to talk to other people about women like me, who are sort of between two cultures and between the pressures of you know, being raised by Italian immigrants and being university educated, and all of that, you know, that sort of struggle, which is a struggle that you choose or not to take on, right? As my kids sometimes, you know, in encouraging me, say, do whatever you want, Mom, you know. So I'd like to move to Iceland, for instance, but I'm not going to do that because I have responsibilities here, you know, including 3 aging parents. So that first collection I wrote for women who might identify living between cultures and sort of doing the juggling act all the time, and also for other people, men who might sort of get an inkling of what we're going through as women. And I know men are dealing with a lot of the same issues, but of course I was writing about something that I was very close to. So that the first book was I guess mostly for women. And The Pink House and Other Stories, that's a combination of things. That is, a lot of those stories about a writer who can't write, a writer who is stuck. And that is for everyone, whether you're stuck writing or stuck in other ways. It's reading stories are supposed to give you hope. Okay, so whether my stories are sad or not, they are always hopeful. So my main objective is to encourage the reader. Anthony, I hope that answers your question. And if not, you all have my email address, so you can always ask me questions by writing to me.
Okay. We have a question from Frank, which is similar. How do you select your story or theme? I guess for a story or for a novel?
Well, I don't really select a theme. I mean, unless I'm responding to a call for submissions and there's a specific theme. So,
well, I guess it means perhaps how do you choose to write a story about a particular subject?
Okay. So when I have a character that is invading my sleep or taking up a lot of space at dinner time, and I'm always talking about this character with my kids and my husband or my sister, that's how I know that I have to write that story. And I have a story, or either an incident or a character in mind, and I'll sit down and start writing. And by the time that story is finished and by the time it actually is published, it may not be at all about that original character. It will have taken so many detours. But that's usually how I decide to start writing. It's a character, it's something that I'm like has invaded everything. So I have to, let it go.
And I guess this is a question that relates to the previous one, but it's from Carmelina. How do you choose the language in which you write the story?
Okay, so thank you, Carmelina. Carmen Concilio. I am primarily an English language writer. So that's my language. Yes, I was raised in an Italian family. I was raised speaking dialect. I only really started speaking Italian when I had kids. So I write in English. I decide to write in English, except for poetry, which is really weird, which I don't really write in English. So it usually comes out in dialect and or Italian. And then I'm able to self-translate into French, but not into English. So in this case, it's really about the genre. So every genre except poetry or verse is in English. And I take it from there. I do a lot of self-translation. The question as a writer and as a translator is always, do I invest time now in continuing my Massimiliano and Rita story, or do I self-translate a text because someone has asked for it in Italian or in French?
Okay, and we have another question from Frank. This one is about writer's block. Was there a cause or a reason for your extended writer's block? Were you overworked? Did you have too many things on your plate? So I guess there's a hint there as to what the answer should be.
I always have too many things on my plate. I'm always sitting on 15 stools at the same time. No, I was stuck in 2012 because I got hit by a car. And again, I remember, being bedridden for months and learning to walk again. And really interesting, I remember when I started to tell my friends and colleagues I was very good at writing emails, but not anything else. I couldn't finish any of my contracts, for instance, as a writer, translator, editor. I just was completely blocked. And I remember one colleague saying, well, Licia, you were saying that you were overworked, and this is great. You can take time off now. And I thought, yes, that's one way to look at it. Okay, so I have time. I'm going to finish my second book of stories, because the first book was published in 2008. The second book came out in 2018. That is 10 years apart. That is not a very good track record. But I wasn't able to. In fact, I went to see an art therapist to get me unblocked. And that's where the 6 stories about Leonard Cohen come from. It was from art therapy, because I was blocked, and blocked with creative writing, but also blocked any kind of writing, I'm a freelancer, so I've got to go out and hustle and get that next contract and convince people to give me work and convince them to pay me afterwards, right? I wasn't able to do that. I sort of I had lost my motivation, but eventually I got it back. So I'm really grateful for that.
And one more question, perhaps the last one. Carmelo asks or says, speaking of language, and then he asks, do you worry or think about repeating yourself when you are writing?
I'm guessing that is, whether I write something and then include the translation. So a lot of my stories have Italian words or whole sentences. And then, I know some authors give the translation. I don't do that, but I leave it in Italian or in French, and the reader can figure it out, in the next paragraph, without giving the translation. Do I repeat myself? I guess I repeat myself in the sense that I write a story in one language and then self-translate it in another. So that's a form of repetition. But even when I self-translate, it isn't because I'm the author, I tend to take liberties, and I just, I translate and rewrite. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Well, thank you. There are no further questions, and I think this kind of wraps it up. Licia, I don't know if you want to make a closing statement. I want to just read some closing remarks to thank everyone. But before I do, perhaps you'd like to say something?
Oh, yes. Well, I want to thank you, Domenic, for taking care of the technical side of things. And I want to thank Decho to be he's the backup technician. And I want to thank everyone who came today. Some people I know, some people I don't know. So I'm grateful that you were here. If you have any other questions, if you have any other comments, you have my email, feel free to write to me. I look forward to other events that will be in person. And somebody asked me a question, how much do I miss traveling? I miss it a lot. How much do I miss traveling to Italy? I miss it a lot. Just thank you. And those of you who are writers, keep at it. If you're blocked, maybe come to our Shut Up and Write on Thursday mornings. Everyone is welcome, 10 to 12:30. My objective is to keep it going for 52 straight weeks. So I'll be doing that, even though I might not be writing. You might have an opportunity to do so, and it's a great group of people. And that's it. Thanks so much. I'm really grateful that you came. And of course, I want to thank the Writers Union of Canada for funding this event, the Canada Council of the Arts, the Association of Italian Canadian Writers for their support, Accenti, Longbridge Books, and all of you for being here. Thank you. Have a great end of Saturday.
Well, I was going to do the very same thing. So, Licia, thanks for stealing my thunder. Thank you all once again for joining us. This event on Zoom was brought to you by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Writers Union of Canada. It is part of the Books and Biscotti literary series. thanks to the Association of Italian Canadian Writers, the AICW. The AICW accepts donations. It's a nonprofit. So if you would like to make a donation, you can do so at aicw.ca/donate. And that's about it. So thank you all once again, and have a good Saturday, have a good weekend, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, Esther. Bye, Pat. Bye, Louise. Bye, Conchetta. Bye, Maria. It's great to see all of you. I didn't see you before because I was spotlighted.